Serious people who killed in self-defense. What's your story? Shared this before, but I was staying with my grandfather while my parents were out of state, and I woke up to a noise coming from upstairs, main floor. I was in the basement and just knew it wasn't my grandfather. He has hearing damage from Vietnam, and it didn't wake him up, but there was banging around and heavy footsteps. I was in the room with the gun cabinet, so I grabbed a shotgun and went to check it out. When I got to the top of the stairs I just saw a guy in the living room going through stuff, so I pressed the safety and said he needed to leave. He turned around and saw my unthreatening scared as shit 14-year-old self and told me to just go back downstairs and mind my business, so I repeated myself. He turned around and started walking towards me with something in his hand, so I fired. At this point my grandpa is very awake and comes out of his room and just tells me to look away and call the police. Thankfully, due to all the factors of him being a repeat offender, having a weapon, my age, and castle laws, it didn't go any further than the police coming and asking me questions. It messed me up for a while, and I still think about it often, but I got over it and realized that as unfortunate as it was, I didn't have a whole lot of options at that point. I was 12, the oldest of 3 brothers. We were home alone while my parents were out on date night. At maybe 10 PM we hear a loud banging at the front door before a man broke the lock with his sheer body weight and momentum. I told my brothers to hide in my room while I went to my parents' room for their shotgun. The whole time this guy's yelling about where are my keys, and he starts coming upstairs. When he heard me fumbling as I tried to load the shotgun, he flung the door to my parents' room open, and I fell back with the gun shaking in my hands. I closed my eyes and pulled the trigger twice. The first one caught him in the legs and the recoil made the second shot catch his entire torso. The poor man had been drunk and lived a few houses down the way, but I didn't learn that until after. All I could focus on was how he was begging his mother, she wasn't there, not to let him die, and that he was sorry he let her down as he slowly died on the floor just feet away from me. When I was 13, I was babysitting my younger brother. Parents were out having a dinner date. At the time my family lived on a dirt road, away from the city. Quiet place, so my parents didn't think much of leaving me alone with my 9-year-old little brother for an hour or two. I was putting him to bed when I heard a knock on the door. This knock was loud, and he banged several times before stopping for a moment. Then I heard glass shatter. I immediately grabbed my .22 long rifle my parents got for me and hid in my little brother's room behind his bed with rifle mounted at the door. Told him to hide under the bed and make no noise whatsoever, no matter what happens. I had forgotten about my cell phone on the kitchen table halfway across the house. I remember thinking to myself to protect my little brother at any cost. I heard a lot of noises coming from inside my house. First in the kitchen, then living room, then my room, then finally the hallway to my little brother's room. As the door opened I seen a unfamiliar guy. He quickly seen me then rushed me. As there was a good 5 to 10 steps from the door to my brother's bed I fired all the rounds in my rifle, 5 rounds if anyone is wondering. I just remember him dropping on the floor with a loud thud, my brother crying, and out of blood. I called my parents, after which they called the police. After talking with my parents, they told me the police said that the guy was our next door neighbor and a registered sex offender, most likely was staking out the house and he noticed we were home, but our parents weren't. Honestly, it hasn't affected me as an adult. I did what had to be done, and I don't regret anything. Needless to say, any future dinner dates my parents had back then they brought us along, which was nice. Some guy tries to mug me in the street. He tells me to give him my wallet. I pulled my concealed carry and shot him in the leg, fatal, and pelvis as I pulled up my gun. I grabbed his gun, a snub-nose revolver, out of his hand, and see the chamber. It was empty. That fucked me up for years. Edit. From some of the comments I see, I should point out the revolver was still in his waistband, with his hand on the grip, when I pulled my weapon. Not my story, but someone who I know. At the time, my friend was single and an officer in the military. He was coming from work, and when he walked into his house he noticed a pile of his belongings in the center of the floor and his sliding glass door broken, and in the open position. He checked his closet and his guns were missing. They were not in a safe. He got on the phone with 911 and was telling them what had happened and how his house looked while checking each room. His R-15 was still behind the door, as the robber had evidently missed it, so he chambered around while waiting on the police. While he was still on the phone with 911, he saw a man jump over his privacy fence with a plastic bag in his hand. Evidently the robber was coming back to get the items he had piled up in the living room floor. Knowing the robber had already stolen some of his weapons, and not knowing if the robber had them on him or had stashed them somewhere, he raised the rifle as the robber came in through the open sliding glass door and yelled for the robber to get on the ground. The robber made a move with his right hand towards the small of his back, and my friend opened fire at less than 10 meters, hitting the robber center mass 3 times. As he came over to the robber, he noticed that one of his stolen handguns had fallen from the robber's waist. The robber asked him, "Why'd you kill me, man?" and expired on the spot. The shooting was ruled justified. The robber had just recently been released from prison for burglary and had been living with his grandmother, who had a house in the neighborhood. I asked my friend if he felt bad about it, and he told me he didn't feel bad at all about the shooting, but he did feel bad about not having all of his guns in a safe, as not having them secured led to his decision to shoot, knowing the robber had some of his guns. Happened last week. Guy broke into my house, and I woke up when I heard noises in the hallway. I took my gun out and yelled through the door for him to get out, and that I already notified the police. He barged into the bedroom holding a knife. 5 seconds later, I shot him twice in the abdomen, and he died in the hospital. I still feel pretty conflicted about this. It's hard to describe, but I do feel bad about doing it. He had a family after all. On the other hand, I figured it was him or me and my girlfriend, and I had no other choice. I do think it'll need a few more weeks to truly sink in, but I can tell you I haven't slept well since. I'm also constantly distracted at work right now. The police told me I was lucky to wait until he went into the bedroom with a weapon, as otherwise I could have faced manslaughter charges. As it is, it's gonna be lawful self-defense. Posted on a different thread a while ago, but it fits this one too, so here goes. I didn't kill a person, but my neighbor's dog. Animal death warning for anyone who's bothered by that stuff. It was one of my neighbor's retired police dog, German Shepherd, and had been having issues with PTSD. It became very aggressive towards other neighbors, and actually broke my elderly neighbor's arm by chasing her down and using her forearm as its own personal rag doll. The community wanted it put down after that incident, but the owner just said she'd muzzle the dog. I straight up told her, if that dog ever attacked anyone in my family, I had young siblings, I would kill it. All was good for about 2 to 3 months until one day when my 2 little sisters, 8yo and 6yo, we were outside playing, and I heard them start screaming. I ran outside, and this dog had them trapped on the playset in our front yard. It was a wooden castle type of structure, and they had climbed up on top of the roof, so the dog couldn't reach them. I grabbed my older brother's aluminum baseball bat and went over to confront the dog. It didn't have a muzzle on and seemed very angry. I yelled at it and it charged me. So as it jumped at me, I just swung at it and made contact with its head. That killed the dog immediately. Dog's owner was pissed. Cops were called. My parents and other neighbors backed me up. Nothing more happened. We moved away a few months later after she adopted another dog. My father taught me to shoot a double-barrel shotgun at 9 years old, and we've had guns for protection my entire life. I'm a firm believer that the greatest gift you can give those you love is the skills to protect themselves, and the proper use of a gun will save a life. When my son was 2 years old, I heard someone at my back door. Once I realized he got in my house, I warned him first with that beautiful sound a shotgun makes, and he ignored it. I had no choice. When he headed to my son's room, I pointed it at him, and he mocked me. I pulled the trigger, and it was over. I felt nothing but relief. I saved my family. No charges filed, and our lives went on as usual, but I was a little more careful. The intruder was a convicted rapist and pedophile, so he wasn't there to rob us, he was there to hurt us. I was walking home from the rec center when I was 15. It had gotten a lot darker due to daylight savings and I didn't realize the time. I lived in a bad neighborhood. I was going home, and this guy in the alleyway attacked me. He started beating the shit out of me and robbing me. I still don't know why he just didn't take his gun out and shoot me. Anyways, I started fighting back and wrestling this guy. Somehow the gun got knocked about 2 feet away from my head. He was on top of me beating me and choking me. I started feeling around and there was this pretty pointy rock that was next to this trash can. I grabbed it and punched him with it in his rib and then again to his jaw. I shrimped out and crawled towards the gun. Once I had it, I rolled over and shot him 3 times and just laid there for a few minutes trying to process what the fuck just happened. Damn, killed him with his gun? That's pretty badass. So this isn't exactly what Op is asking for, but it's a story, and it's my story, and I feel like sharing it. Downvote if you want. IDC. When I was 21, my girlfriend was raped by her next door neighbor. It hit me harder than anything in my life had ever hit me before, and that includes the death of my mother from cancer when I was 16. Anyway, I completely freaked out and begged her to go to the police. But since the perpetrator was the son of her mom's best friends, she wouldn't go to the police. I could BS you all and say that I did this to protect her, but it was at least 75% about vengeance when I went to his door and shot him in his chest. The police caught me fleeing from the scene. He ended up not dying, so I was only charged with attempted first-degree murder and spent a little over a decade in prison for it. He never did get charged with rape or anything like that, and even at my sentencing the state attorney wouldn't come out and say that my victim had not committed a rape, only that he never was arrested/charged for it. Anyway, life goes on, and I've been out of prison for almost 17 years. My ex had nothing to do with me after all of this happened. Career-wise and such, I made an excellent recovery after finishing my STEM BS following prison. Emotionally, I don't think I'll ever truly recover, and there's a part of me that feels forever an outsider from society at large. Looking back now, do you regret doing it? I think I would have despised myself if I hadn't, and to such an extreme that I probably would have suicided. The choice I made isn't necessarily the right choice for anybody and everybody who might find themselves in that situation, but it was right for me, and I don't hate the way my life turned out.